folks. Today is July 19th, 2013, and tomorrow is my last day of being on HCG, and then from that point I'm going to be on what's called a rest period, which I guess is my body's time to rest from being on the HCG, and it's also a time where my body is resetting its weight point. In other words, I've lost about 25, no, I'm not going to exaggerate, 22 pounds so far, but at this point, this is the time where my body resets my goal weight from way up there in the 270s to down where I am now, and according to the paperwork, this is actually more important than the HCG part. But anyway, the diet that I'm going to be on for the next 30 some odd days is going to be a low carb, low starch, very low sugar diet. Any sugar I have is going to come from fruit. The good thing is there are a lot of foods that I can eat, but one of the things that I like to do is cook, and I want to try to make this next 30 days as interesting as possible, because for me, it's actually learning how to love cooking, but learning how to love it without all the shit that fucks my body up. So this means, pretty much no cow's milk, no carbs, no gluten, all that other stuff. One of the things that's abundantly clear, especially to those of you who like to cook, is that eating healthy is not cheap. So I decided that if this is going to have to be a lifestyle change, not just for myself, but for me to be able to create a better life for my children and for BJ, it might behoove me to start learning how to cook some of the more expensive items myself. One of the things that I'm absolutely positively in love with are tomatoes. Now, I will say this. The allergy test that I took said that I do have a mild to moderate allergic reaction to tomatoes, so they're not something I can eat every day, but I do feel like I can eat them sporadically on a variety of different foods. And as you know, sun-dried tomatoes in the store are really expensive. So I just Googled how to make sun-dried tomatoes and decided to make some on my own. Now, there are 3 different ways to make sun-dried tomatoes. You can do it the old-fashioned way, which is literally put the tomatoes outside in the sun and let them dry. That process can take up to 2 weeks. We've been going through a tremendous thunderstorm season this summer in Georgia, and it will probably take 2 to 3 weeks to get the sun-dried tomatoes that I want if I do it the natural way. So I've decided that I'm going to do the oven method. And the oven method basically just entails me putting the tomatoes in the oven on a low temperature, like 100 to 200 degrees Fahrenheit, and letting them cook for 6 to 12 hours. The third method is to use a dehydrator. I don't have one of those. So since the sun takes too long and I don't have a dehydrator, I'm using the oven method. Let me get this out of the way. So it's a pretty simple process. I've already done some of it. I chose Roma tomatoes because they tend to be very meaty, or meaty as in they have a lot of tomato flesh, and they're not very expensive. So according to the recipe that I found on Google, I needed to cut the stems off and slice them up, which I've already done. I took about maybe 40 ounces of tomatoes, so what is that, like maybe 5 pounds? I always forget how many ounces are in a pound, but I just took 2 packs, which is like maybe, I don't know, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 26, 28. So it was like 14 tomatoes, approximately, sorry. And it says to just sprinkle them with fine sea salt. I only had coarse sea salt, so I just threw the sea salt in my blender and made it so that it was fine. So it said sprinkle the tomatoes. I love tomatoes. And it's funny, the salt now looks like powdered sugar. And I've spent all this money on this Vitamixer like 2 or 3 years ago, and all I've ever used it for are to make smoothies and mix drinks. So it was nice to actually use it for, something for a good cause that was actually healthy. And I realized it actually ended up making a lot of ground sea salt that I'm just going to keep in this container and start using that in a lot of my cooking. So I actually ended up with quite a lot. So I'm just going to go ahead and sprinkle them with sea salt. And then it said to put them on cake pans. I'm assuming these are cake pans. These are pans that I bought from a grocery store here called Aldi's, and you're supposed to use them to cool cookies. But I figured, hey, why not? You're not supposed to stick them directly on the oven rack, nor are you supposed to put them on a cookie sheet. So I figured these are probably going to be the best method. So that's what I'm going to do. I think I've covered them all. And it basically said just to, just to lay the tomatoes on here. I've got 3 racks, so I guess that'll be about 9 tomatoes per rack. I'm excited about this because I use sun-dried tomatoes on everything. I figure I can make sun-dried tomato pesto, which I love. I love pesto. But what's interesting about this low-carb diet is Multi-Care Health, on the packet that they gave me a lot of really interesting recipes and ways to keep things creative. So instead of pasta, for example, they said you can eat spaghetti, but do it with, I guess, spaghetti squash, which I've never done, but I'm excited about trying that. And I'm excited about putting some sun-dried tomato pesto on some spaghetti squash. I'll do that. I think one of the other items I'm going to make are their pizzas, but instead of using crust, you use either eggplant or portobello mushroom. Plus, since I'm only allergic to cow's milk, I've also got goat cheese and feta cheese. And I believe feta cheese is made with goat and sheep milk. And then, of course, goat cheese is made with just goat milk. And I also bought some eggplant, so I'm going to make some pizzas out of that. I also bought stuff to make sushi rolls without rice. So I think I'm going to go ahead and record that stuff as well, because I love to eat. I love those items, and it's nice to know that I have an alternative to a carb and starch version. So I think I'm kind of doing the camera by myself, so I'm trying to lean over so you can see everything. But ultimately, this is what the tomatoes look like on the rack, and I've got 3 racks. So I'm going to go ahead and put these in the oven, and when they are finished in 12 hours, I'll show them to you. Supposedly it's supposed to yield 2 cups. So we'll see how that goes, and then I'll probably slice them up and then, you know, put them on my sandwiches, put them on pasta, you know, just kind of incorporate them into meals, and I'll save myself some money. So with that being said, I'll touch back in about 12 hours or however long it takes for these things to completely dry out and let you know how they turned out. Again, these are homemade sun-dried tomatoes.